Today, I'm going to talk about some of the physical evidences that at least convinced me, and I'll be the first person to say, look, don't believe me. Don't believe anything. Just, listen, take notes if you want to, but go out and start searching for yourself to see whether these things be true. One of the first things you're going to have to do is take the red pill. How many of you know what that means? Right? You're going to need to take the red pill first. If you're still sucking on the blue pill, you're not going to get anything. And part of sucking on the blue pill is an undying faith in NASA and science that I believe, biblically speaking, is falsely so called. We need to realize that NASA and all other space agencies are simply full of crap. And when you start looking into various things like JFK, 9/11, moon landings, things like that, the moon landing is a big one. If you still believe we actually went to the moon, you need to do some research. You can start with these videos right here. Bart Sabell's got some good ones. A funny thing happened on the way to the moon. Astronauts Gone Wild. There's Operation Avalanche is it's a movie made to sort of explain how it might have happened. How were they able to fool everybody? I appreciate a line in that movie when they realized they weren't going to make it to the moon, and they're like, well, we're going to have to fake it. And they're like, well, how are we going to convince everybody? And one of the characters says, we don't need to convince everybody. We need to convince Walter Cronkite. Because everybody loves and trusts him. So if he's convinced, then everybody else will become convinced. I thought that was a brilliant line. Check out the website aulis.com, A-U-L-I-S. Great information there, PhD level people doing lots of research, analyzing all the photographs and whatnot. We did not go to the moon. And once you realize we didn't go to the moon, you have to realize this picture is not real. This is the most significant sphere of influence, pardon the pun intended, that has ever existed, in my opinion. That picture is not real if we didn't go to the moon. And this was one of the first people that got me to think that way. Matt Boylan, what if he's right? I don't know if you've seen some of his routine. Is it real or is it painting? Just to kind of put some things into perspective in that regard. Everything you see on the screen there are paintings. They're all paintings. Those are not photographs of wine bottles and glasses at the top. On the bottom, those are not sculptures. Those are paintings of sculptures done by a friend of mine. Pretty amazing, huh? Now, looking at those pictures right there, which do you think is harder to paint? That might put a few things in perspective, huh? Well, they're pretty much coming right out and telling us that a lot of the stuff we're seeing is space art.
I'm a visualization scientist. I basically try to come up with ways of explaining complex science stories through the visuals and developing artwork and illustrations that actually can help explain the science story to people.
For decades, popular culture and shows like Star Trek inspired a generation of scientists by envisioning what space might look like. But wait, what does space actually look like? Heart nebulas, celestial collisions, a bird's eye view of the Milky Way, astronomers are charting the outer reaches of the cosmos and bringing back jaw-dropping images from telescopes like Hubble and its infrared cousin Spitzer. If you look down at the bottom of that Milky Way image, you'll see these two words: artist concept. This sweeping image of the Orion Nebula actually looks like this. And the TRAPPIST-1 star system, the latest discovery of 7 potentially habitable exoplanets that made national headlines, it's really only a box of gray and white pixels. You see, space art is part of NASA, and it has been since before we went to the moon.
It sure has. A lot of space art going on. Stumbled across something recently that caught my attention. How many of you have heard of the comic book, The Watchmen? You hear that? Yeah, that came out in 1986. It was actually created by an occultist named Alan Moore. And in that comic book, he has a character, Dr. Manhattan, living on has a Mars base, living in a crater that looks like a smiley face. And what do you know, 13 years later, NASA puts out a picture of a crater on Mars with a smiley face on it. Probably just a coincidence. Oh, and for Halloween, the sun just happens to look like a jack-o'-lantern. And, oh yeah, this one just came out here. NASA Hubble telescope sees creepy space face for Halloween. Boo! NASA and ESA's space telescope looked out into the cosmos and found 2 glowing eyes staring back just in time for Halloween. Wow, imagine that. When you start looking into all this stuff and you start seeing some of the evidences that people are putting forward for the globe, it's like, really? Seriously? This is your evidence?
The Earth is round, and here's the proof. Remember Felix Baumgartner? He jumped from the edge of space a few years back to perform the highest parachute jump ever. Well, that was on a live feed in front of hundreds of thousands of people, and you can clearly see the Earth's curvature. So yes, there is tons of proof that Earth is a sphere.
Hear the condescending attitude? That was on a live feed in front of hundreds of thousands of people. So, yes, there's tons of proof. Okay, the exact same curvature was seen at 5 feet when Felix touched the ground as it was when he was up at high altitude. And yet you can't figure that out. And just recently, I had a knockdown, drag-out fight on Facebook with people trying to convince me that the lower picture there was legitimate from the ISS. Right? I'm like, okay, that shows the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, and the Gulf of Oman. Now, there's a model up at the top there that shows the actual scale of those locations, right? And yet, on the bottom, that's taking up the entire, what they would consider the northern hemisphere of their globe. And they're telling me that's a legitimate picture. I'm like, do you have any critical thinking skills in that noodle of yours at all? Clearly, there's something going on there. They're using fisheye lenses. And what I found as I started looking through a lot of the NASA footage and stuff is they've been using fisheye lenses right from the beginning.
Now I want to talk about the Gemini 4 spacewalk, June 1965. First of all, I want you to know they've been using fisheye lenses right from the beginning. And here's a proof of it right here from footage supposedly from Gemini 4. Look at, watch. Ooh, going flat. Oh, they cut away. Let's look at it again, though, since they cut away, flat, bulging out to being convex. Look at that globe. Wait. Oh, here it goes, going flat. Anyway, some very interesting things about this footage.
Stood up in the seat and got ready to go, and we cleared him to go, and then he took and pushed off from the seat.
Now notice how fast the Earth is moving below them. And look at the way this is shot. He's all herky-jerky, but the Earth below is moving nice and smooth.
Ed White is flying at 17,000 miles per hour, 200 miles above the Earth.
Okay, I'm out.
Okay, they said they're about 200 miles above the Earth and moving at 17,000 miles per hour, okay? Keep that in mind.
If the lifeline fails, he'll literally be lost in space.
Oh, no.
Today, those pictures are classic.
Yeah, they're classic, all right. Okay, now, when I first saw people doing commentary on this, when he turns his head like that, they're saying, see, that's proof, that this is not right. Then I found this footage right here. So apparently, they can turn their heads, so I guess that's been debunked. But compare the stop-motion animation of King Kong, the original King Kong movie, with this footage of Gemini 4. The background's moving nice and smooth, but in the foreground, it's very herky-jerky, very much like the old stop-motion stuff. So, yeah, I'm going to say that looks fraudulent to me. Now, the International Space Station is also supposedly at about 254 miles high and moves at the same speed. Now, check this out.
This is the cupola. It sticks down below the space station. And a lot of folks, I play this game with myself about where we're flying over the Earth.
Uh-oh. Somebody forgot to speed up the animation. This is the day the Earth stood still, ladies and gentlemen. Compare again the Gemini space footage. Both are supposedly at about 200 miles high and moving at 17,000 plus miles per hour. So somebody's lying here, folks. Either the Gemini footage is fraudulent or the ISS footage is fraudulent. You got to recognize that somebody's lying to you here. Look how fast the Earth is moving in the Gemini, and look how the Earth's not moving on the ISS. And just by way of closing, more proof that they're using a fisheye lens. This is from the same Gemini 4 documentary. Look at that, concave. Oh, no, it's going flat. Oh, no, convex. Oh, wait a minute. No, the Earth's concave. No, it's going flat. Oh, no, it's convex. Whoop, concave. Whoop, flat. Oh, nope.
During re-entry, the USS Wasp launched 13 search and recovery aircraft.
13.
Gemini 4 splashed down at 12:13 Eastern Standard Time.
12:13.
June 7th, 1965.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now, I did find the footage of them turning their head inside the helmet, but I still think there'd be major problems with that if they were in a vacuum environment and stuff like that. What kind of seal would they have to be able to turn? I think the whole thing's fraudulent. I think, you know, I'm saying you got to recognize that either Gemini is a fraud or the ISS is a fraud. I think they're both a fraud, frankly. But we'll go on. Let's look at terrestrial-based observations, part 5. When I first got into this, people, of course, immediately, the knee-jerk response is, you're an idiot, you're a moron. What the heck, man? If you've ever been to the beach, you've seen the curve. Sorry, I have to do that every now and then. It's cathartic for me, because that's what I hear in my head now. Every time people start saying stuff like that. Anybody else relate to that? Maybe a little bit. Yeah, they're telling me, okay, if you've ever been to the beach, you've seen the curve. So I start going to beaches, start taking lots of pictures, start bringing them into Photoshop, put a parallel line over it. No, it's flat. So that I'm in Malibu, and I go climb the top of a high mountain in Malibu looking out there. That's about 100 miles across right there. Took a picture of it, again, straight. Went down from Malibu to meet a friend. It's a writer helping me with my seed project. And he grew up in Ventura, in the Ventura Beach area, and he was a lifeguard growing up. And he tells me a story about looking out and seeing the Anacapa Arch. The arch itself is about 40 feet high, and the inside of the arch, from the water to the inside of the arch, is about 25 feet. It's about, from where he was, he said it was 20 miles away. And he said he could see the thing. So that's what got him thinking. He saw me posting stuff on Facebook and stuff, you know, people seeing stuff they're not supposed to see, and he's like, wait a minute, I've seen the Anacapa Arch, and that's 20 miles away. So he went to a friend of his at a university that teaches math, and he said, okay, you know, we're on a globe approximately 25,000 miles in circumference, right? Yeah, okay, what's the math? Yeah, you know, it averages out to about 8 inches per mile squared. Okay, cool. So if we're looking out at an object 20 miles away that's 40 feet high, should we be able to see it? And he did the math up on the board, taking into account observer height and all that kind of stuff. No, shouldn't be able to see it. You know, so you're saying we should not be able to, no, impossible, should not be able to see it. He said, well, the problem is, dude, we've all seen it. And the guy's like, what do you mean? He's like, the Anacapa Arch. All of a sudden you're hearing the Flintstone sound effect, you know, when Fred had something happens to him, he's like, the math professor's looking at the board, you know, looking at his own math, and something's up there, I don't know. Started having a lot of those types of experiences, both myself and with others. Met a guy at a conference, he came up to me, he was a professional surveyor, and he says, I gotta show you something, dude. And he shows me his surveyor book, it's first order level book, and under the formula for figuring out curvature and refraction at the top there, it says, rules for applying curvature and refraction when trig leveling. Subtract curvature and refraction on the back sight, add curvature and refraction on the foresight. What? You know? So then I have people say, well, if you've ever flown in an airplane, you see the curve. I'm in airplanes all the time. I'm traveling all over the world doing conferences and all kinds of stuff. So I started taking pictures out of the airplane. Every altitude that I've been at, take pictures of it, bring it into Photoshop, put a line on it, flat. I'm going, well, and then again, you know, I'm searching online and looking for, there's got to be some kind of proof out there for the globe that I can latch onto, right? So you find all these videos like, top 10 proofs why we know the Earth's a globe, and they're coming up with stuff like this.
Number 3, the horizon. Ships on the ocean or tall Chicago buildings viewed over Lake Michigan disappear bottom first. And you can see the sunset twice if you watch it lying down and then quickly stand up. The simple fact is, if the Earth were flat, there wouldn't be a horizon beyond which things could disappear. So from across Lake Michigan, you'd be able to see all of Chicago, as well as the Rocky Mountains.
If the Earth were truly flat, there would be really hardly any limit. You'd be able to stand at the top of the Empire State Building and look toward Chicago, a mere 1,000 miles away, and see the lights of Chicago at night.
Really, dude? Scientists, you notice. That's a scientist there. One of the things, the criticism I hear about this conference and stuff is, well, there's not a scientist among them, no PhDs. Look, I consider that an advantage, frankly. Because the stuff I hear from PhDs is not impressive to me. You know, here's this guy saying he's claiming to be a scientist and saying I should be able to see Chicago from New York. You know, there's this crazy thing in between us called the atmosphere. Look it up, dude. Wow. As for an example of why ships disappear hull first and why you miss the lower parts of buildings, come see me at my table back there. I've got a little show and tell for you to show you how it works. And it came as a result of this guy right here. This picture, and of course you saw this in Jake's trailer there earlier. This picture came out right in the beginning of our whole sort of awakening in 2015. Joshua Nowicki snaps a picture of Chicago skyline from the other side of Lake Michigan, sends it into the ABC News affiliate. Weatherman does this whole thing about saying, we should not be able to see it. The only way you'd be able to see this is like higher up, out in space looking down. He says, so what you're seeing here is a mirage. That poor guy had no idea how famous he was about to become. He's just a weatherman, just doing his thing. Next thing you know, flat earthers are all over the poor guy. Now, of course, when I first saw that, I'm like, mirages are wavy, distorted, upside down. That's not a mirage, And Rick said the same thing, and then Rick told me because he lives in that area, Rick Hummer. He's like, I've seen Chicago my whole life. I'm like, really? People have seen it? He's like, everybody's seen it. So he started driving out there to the location. Hello? Okay. I'll just stand like this for a little bit. Rick starts going there and taking pictures, and then he starts talking to police officers on duty and getting them to like, wait a minute, how come we can see Chicago, Like everybody can see it. So I'm like, Rick, man, we started talking, we're like, we need to come up with a way of proving this, And so we're thinking, the best thing to do, in my mind anyway, was to rent a boat, get in the thing, and drive out there and shoot it the whole way, on a clear day. Because my thinking was, if it's a mirage, then as we're driving close to the city, it's going to magically disappear, and then the city will roll up over the ball, and there it is, If it's just the city just is there, it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger in the camera, which is exactly what it did. But we still had to explain why the lower part of the city was missing. Because people, when they saw my video, Rick and I, it was about a little over a year later, we finally went out there and did the test, and I put out this video that really went viral. Rob Skiba proves the Chicago skyline is not a mirage. We learned a lot of things on that trip, like the haze that's at the bottom there, that's obscuring a significant amount of the lower part of the city, and of course, as you get further back, 46 miles or so, it's compounded all the more. But when we finally found it, it took a year to save the money, to get a boat captain willing to do it, and weather conditions and all that stuff, so it took a while to get out there. Meanwhile, the weatherman had been getting so much flack for this whole thing, online. He went to an optics professor at a university, and the optics professor corrected him, said, well, technically it's not really a mirage, it's more like looming, which I guess is part of that whole category of, atmospheric conditions and whatnot, distortions and what have you. So he starts to explain it. Now, I was very thankful that he did that, because that was almost exactly a year to the day that he got the photograph that they did the news report, and right about that same time is when we were doing the trip. Now, when we did the trip, people were like, Skiba proved it's a globe. See, you're still missing the lower part of the city. So, ipso facto, therefore, it has to be a globe. And so, at the time we did the trip, on one hand, we felt like we had a victory. On the other hand, we felt like, no, not really, because it's inconclusive. We're still missing the lower part of the city, so what's going on? Well, here's a clip from the talk that the weatherman had with the optics professor, and then some of the conclusions I came to as a result of it.
So is all this under Mirage, and then looming is under Mirage, or what are the semantics of looming versus Mirage?
Okay, well, that's all. I guess that's all in the details of the terminology. And from what I understand, technically, I think Mirage has to have an inverted image. Whereas there are other atmospheric effects such as looming or towering that are purely displacement, and you don't necessarily have to have an inverted image in order for refractive effects to occur in the atmosphere.
So they would all fall under the category of atmospheric refraction.
I guess that would be a good thing to say. Yes.
Okay, so again, this is their graphic. According to them, we know the Earth's a ball, so therefore this is the way it's working. Chicago's over here on the left, we got the curve of the Earth here, and the light rays, which would normally be going straight across, have to be bent due to the atmospheric lensing, the density of the atmosphere and whatnot, causing the light to refract downward, basically just conveniently enough over the top of the bulge of the curve so that we can see it on the other side. Now, here's where I would differ with this whole idea. Again, just sort of flipping the board. Let's just say we don't start with any preconceived notions of the Earth as a globe. Let's entertain for a moment the completely absurd notion that water is flat and it always seeks its own level. And we're looking across a flat plane of water, 46 miles across. Check this image out right here. Now, I caught this image shortly after Rick and I returned from our trip across the lake. We grabbed a bite to eat, and then we went out to the beach, and it was still clear out, so we got the camera out and looked 46 miles across the lake to see this right here. This image is extraordinary. Okay, the boat right here, I'm going to guess, is less than a mile away. And I base that because these people walking in front of the camera here are walking across some rocks that sort of jut out and kind of fence in the harbor area. And they are only about a quarter of a mile away from where we were when I shot this. I shot this image from right about here. This is where we were looking across, and this is the area right here where those people were walking. And the boat, as you could tell by the size of the people on the boat, wasn't too much further beyond that. So maybe a half mile to a mile, or at the most, I would say, away. All right, now when I was headed back to Chicago to catch my flight, I snapped this picture of the Willis Tower. And this is, if you go on Google Earth, this is right about the area right here where I believe I was when I took that picture. Looking across, it's only about 0.6 of a mile. So I'm just a little over a half mile away, and look at the size of the tower as compared to the car that was diagonally in front of me. We were looking at the Willis Tower from this direction right here when we were on the other side of the lake. Now, okay, so let me slide the car over and shrink it down to the appropriate scale beside the boat. Do you see something rather interesting here? This building is significantly magnified. The image on the left shows the size and scale of the building next to a car at 0.6 of a mile away. The image on the right shows the same building and the same car with a boat at 46 miles away. The atmosphere really is acting like a lens. What type of lens? A convex lens or a magnifying glass. So I'm going to suggest this is what's happening. The atmosphere is acting like a lens, which magnifies the city, brings it up a little closer, and as it does so, we start to lose a little bit of the bottom of the buildings, and perhaps due to the density in the atmosphere, there's an additional refraction that takes place that makes it drop down even more. Huh. Just like we saw. Now, this is a still frame from the half-hour video that I did, and the numbers you see there are all based on the numbers that Tony was giving me based on his device. His device said it was 37 nautical miles, which is 42.6 statute miles, but when you plot the same exact location that we were at, the exact distance you get on Google Earth is 46 miles. So you basically add about 4 miles to all the numbers that you saw in the half-hour video. But here's where it gets interesting, at least to me. Both of these pictures were taken with the same camera from the harbor area here. The red line at the top is where we were in the boat. We're just about to depart when I asked Tony to stop, and I got the camera out to shoot Chicago. And the lower red line is where we were on the beach when I took the picture on the bottom there. Now, here's the shot from the beach before I zoomed in. Now I'm zooming in, zooming in, zooming in, and I'm going to stop it right about here. That's about halfway on the zoom, and I believe that's where Rick had the camera set when he took the picture above. Based on the size of the building right here, I'm going to guess that he was about halfway. Alright, so let's go ahead and continue the zoom. And this is zoomed all the way in. The Nikon Coolpix P900 has an 83 power optical zoom, and that little punch in right after that was the digital zoom afterward. It has a digital zoom that goes beyond the 83 power. So gonna guess it's probably the equivalent of about maybe 90 power zoom or so right here. Now let's bring the picture in from the halfway zoom, and I'm going to go ahead and bring our car back in and slide the picture in from Chicago. And so you got 3 different zooms here. One almost completely zoomed out, one zoomed about halfway on an 83 power optical zoom lens, and the one on the right, of course, all the way zoomed in with a little touch of digital zoom on top of that in the camera. And when looking at these images compared to the one on the left, which is just shot with my iPhone, I got to tell you, it looks like it's being magnified to me, especially when you consider the fact that that building is like 45 miles away from that boat. It's 45 miles away. So looks like there's some serious magnification going on here. And, you know, some of that could be due to the lens, I'll give you that. But I also know what I could see with my own eyes. Now, I understand you may not want to take my word for it, so all I can say is go up there and do it yourself. But based on what I saw with my own eyes, as well as what the quote-unquote experts had to say regarding how the atmosphere can act like a magnifying glass, I'm still going to go with it as being magnified. There is a lot of water in our atmosphere. But I'm thinking if the atmosphere, especially over water, is made up of zillions and zillions of tiny convex drops of water, then collectively perhaps they all combine to make one big convex lens, in which case it would act like a magnifying glass. Okay, so with that in mind, let's look up some websites dealing with the refraction of light. You might see a graphic, something like this, showing light bending downward, just like the weatherman guy said. And here's your typical graphic showing how light rays entering some sort of medium, like in this case water, refraction causes the light to bend downward. Now we've all seen pictures of, you know, a pencil or something in a glass of water, and how not only does refraction bend the image downward, it also magnifies it. So this is important now. And let's just go back and hear from the experts once again what's happening with the atmosphere.
The science is the same of that of a lens. Here's a simple example.
So if you're looking at Chicago here, just maybe now you can just see the top of the Sears Tower, and if our simulated temperature inversion moves into place, hopefully now you can see pretty much all of Chicago,
see all the lower buildings,
including what's at ground level.
So the atmosphere really is acting like a lens.
Yes.
Again, based on that imagery that I saw looking 46 miles across versus 0.6 miles across, I really do believe that, just like the experts said, the globalist guys, these are people who believe in the globe now, they are the ones that said, hey, the atmosphere really is acting like a lens, and they put a lens in front of the camera to show how it works. So I'm just doing what they're doing. Using the sheet right here, set the city up, a little cutout of the city, and now I've got the big magnifying glass sheet. Bring the camera right up to the lens. See, that's the normal view of the city. Now let's back up again.
The science is the same of that of a lens. Here's a simple example.
So if you're looking at Chicago here,
the atmosphere really is acting like a lens.
Yes.
Atmosphere really is acting like a lens, and this is how much of the city is missing due to the lensing effect, the magnification of the atmosphere. So thinking about all this and thinking about what I had just shown you regarding atmospheric lensing, magnification, refraction, all that with regard to cities and objects at a distance on the land, I got to thinking, I wonder how this would work with the sun and moon. So this is what I came up with. I've got my magnifying sheet frame, and I created a little stand to paste the sun on it and keep it the same height over the flat surface of a table. So the sun is always going to be parallel with the surface. And check this out. All right, here's the first test of a sun moving over a flat surface, and with no atmospheric magnification, it does what we might expect it would. It gets smaller as it goes away from us. All right, now let's see what happens when we add in our atmospheric magnification. Again, water and refraction. Water causes magnification and refraction, right? So let's bring the sun back. Oh, check this out. Refraction bends the light downward. It made the sun set on a parallel surface. As it was moving parallel, the same height, the whole way over a flat surface, the refraction caused the sun to set. Not only that, well, let's bring in the beginning of that little test, and we see that it maintained pretty much the same size too. And of course that's because as it's moving away, the magnification is still taking place, and so even though the sun's further away than it was in the beginning of the test, the magnification basically preserved the same size, and the refraction made it set. Of course, again, depending on how much moisture is in the air, we could see that the sun doesn't appear to change in size at all as it goes down. We could see sometimes perhaps that it looks like it's getting bigger when it goes down. You ever see like a really big sunset or moonrise, moonset, you know, where one of them looks really large on the horizon? Well, that could be because there's lots of moisture in the air causing that effect. Or when there's less moisture in the air, obviously you won't have as much magnification taking place, and so it looks smaller as it goes away. So it's all relative to the amount of moisture that's in the air. Now, I'm just going to put forward a crazy idea for you to think about. And that is, if Rob Skiba could figure this out, I'm just going to go out on a limb here. I think it's quite possible that the creator of the cosmos could have figured out the same thing and engineered our beautiful sunsets, thanks to all of that water he placed in our atmosphere. Just something to think about.
Thank you.